Welcome, everyone. My name is Katrina Van Huss. I'm the CEO of Turnkey, and I'm here today to help you help other people make irrational decisions at auction. So let me welcome you, and we're going to be examining auctions from a completely different angle. The psychology at work as different things happen leading up to and during the auction. I have with me today several gentlemen that I'll be introducing. Sam and Scott will be sharing real life experiences, and Otis will be commentating and interpreting them from a psychological viewpoint, sort of like the color commentator. I will be interrupting them and cutting them off when I get bored with what they're saying. Those are the rules. Let's play. All right. As I said, I'm Katrina Van Huss, CEO of Turnkey. With me, we have Otis Fulton. He is Turnkey's PhD or Vice President for Psychological Strategy. And he is my husband, which is why it's totally cool when I interrupt him. I'll be nicer with the other gentleman. We also have Scott Robertson, CEO, Champion Fundraising Auctions, and an auctioneer himself. And I will do my best, Scott, not to ask you to do your thing because it just fascinates me. I love it. And we also have Sam Staley, CEO and founder of Event.Gives, the premier platform supporting auctions, and co-founder of Code and Trust. So let's start off with Otis, the psychology of auctions. How do we want people to show up? What kind of mindset should they have walking in the door?
Well, at a fundraising auction, they should have the mindset that they're there to donate money. And it's a very interesting dynamic. They're bidding on items, and yet they come in thinking they're going to make a philanthropic contribution. Both of these things are good because when they actually see the items, some very interesting psychological mechanisms take over, and it causes them to behave irrationally and bid even more than they would. But it's very important that they come in thinking, I'm going to support a charity today.
So Otis, I want to get you to expand a little more. We, at our house, we talk about the impact that the situation has on the behavior of a person as the most important thing. Can you talk about that?
Sure. An auction is kind of, I call it the perfect storm to get people to behave irrationally and spend more money than they want. There are a couple of things that are in play here. There's something in psychology called social facilitation. And that's where, people tend to act differently around other people than they do when they're by themselves. Their arousal is up. It's just a different situation. They can't help but respond to other people. And then as Sam will talk about, there's the time pressure of an auction. And there's the wanting to win. I mentioned earlier, the item becomes important. So all these things are kind of a perfect storm to get people to behave irrationally.
Scott, I am guessing that you have some war stories about situations where you've seen people show up with the right mindset and with the wrong mindset, meaning the situation's not ideal for them. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, if the charity has done their job, they let everybody know from the get-go that this is a fundraising event. This is a fundraiser. That should be on all their marketing out ahead of time. What we don't want to do is have people, hey, come to the event, come to the event, come to the event. Oh, by the way, we're going to have an auction and we're going to try to take some of your money, right? We don't want anybody to ever be surprised. They need to know, as Otis said, they need to know that they're coming to a fundraiser. There's an expectation that they're going to spend money, and hopefully they're going to be able to take something home with them when they do. And as you mentioned, spend irrationally. For people who go to attend auctions, and I used to attend auctions as a kid in rural Kentucky on a farm, you want to buy something and you want to buy things, and you're trying to figure out how you can use it. You don't buy it necessarily because you need it. You buy it because you want to, because as Otis said, you want to win. And I always believe at a champion fundraising auction, you don't buy something there. No, you win it there.
Love it. Sam, war stories, bad and good on this front?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of it across, getting to touch so many events a year. And, to echo some of Scott's points, it all starts with when you arrive at that event. We'll talk later about it. You may even argue that it starts before arriving at the event, but as a platform, I feel like our big job is to make sure those attendees have the best experience getting into the room as possible, so that we fill that room up with happy people for Scott, and can make his job easier, right? If check-in goes slowly, or they're not greeted right at the door, and they had to wait in line, now they're just angry or have a heightened experience, and now Scott's got to win them back over. So
Yeah.
we don't want to create that type of room. We want everyone arriving and just feeling great before the show starts.
So you said something the other day when we were chatting. You said the right people, the right stuff. Tell me what you mean by that.
Yeah, we coach events to this a lot. We have enough data to look backwards at events and can almost predict if you're going to hit your fundraising goal or not. If you
Mhm.
want to raise $400,000 or $1 million,
Yep.
some of that is predicated on, do you have enough value in items to support that goal? So we talk to that and kind of talk about the importance of making sure the mix of item is great, because the other half is who's in the room, right? You can fill the room up with 600 people, or if you're one of Scott's events, it's probably 1,000 or 2,000. But we want to make sure they're the right people that are there for the mission and are capable of spending. And let's put stuff in front of them that they'll be interested in. If we can tell a large constituency in the room likes art and you don't have any, we can help uncover that before the event starts and turn that into success, just because we've seen it enough times and we can kind of coach events, what we've seen not work and what we've seen work.
So what I'm hearing is that we get them to show up with the right mindset. That is, I'm a philanthropist. I'm not just a donor or a buyer. And that when we get them in the room, we have the stage set. Scott, you had talked about like your top rules for living, when it comes to auctions. Can you flow through those real quick for us?
Well, the three things that I find, if you do these three things, it's going to make a big difference. One is timeline and show flow. The most overlooked item at every fundraising event is the timeline, also known as the show flow. If it's abrupt or jerky or anything like that, you're messing up, right? You also want to know when you wish to end your event, and your event shouldn't be end when the fundraising is ending. There should be something else so that people have the desire to stay later. Let the fundraising be part of the event, but it's not the entire event. Just do it early when you have people's attention. And the other one, and Sam sort of alluded to this, is audience development. You have to have people who are attending who support the cause and who have the financial wherewithal in order to make a difference. Just because you invite rich people doesn't mean they're going to spend a nickel. And just because you invite people who are so passionate about your cause, if they don't have any money, you're not going to get that either, right? It's got to be a mix of the two. No, I'm not saying you can't invite wealthy people and you can't invite people that are passionate about the cause, but this is a fundraiser. We have to make decisions based upon what's going to create the most money as we fundraise for our charity. And the third thing we want to do is that you want to have a professional fundraising auctioneer on stage who understands the dynamics of fundraising galas and will help keep the audience engaged and the momentum of the event moving forward. You can't drag things out trying to get the last nickel at all times. It's all about momentum, because once you lose an audience because they sort of tune out, getting them back is really challenging, especially if there's alcohol involved. And well, quite frankly, almost every event has alcohol, right? So if you lose them, you have a much harder time of getting them back. So once you have their attention, capture it and never let your foot off the gas. That's my philosophy.
So it feels like what you're saying is keep it friction free in every way, shape, and form.
Right.
Yeah. So
And
don't.
if I could
no
just
bumps in the road.
piggyback on that just a little
Yeah.
bit, and I've been saying this for years. I've been doing this since 1994. The smoother your the smoother your transitions at a fundraising event, the more successful you're going to be. The people in the audience aren't going to realize that, hey, that event had a lot of smooth transitions.
Yeah.
No, they won't, but they'll sure notice if they aren't smooth, right? We want it just to flow. That's what we want to do. And that will raise you more money every time.
And Sam, as I recall, the way you started your company, the whole idea for your platform, and if you could just hit real quickly what your platform does, actually started based on friction that your wife.
Yeah, that's
experienced.
exactly
Yeah.
why I started it. So, as a platform, what we work every day to do is lower barriers to engaging at events. That's our primary reason for being. And yeah, to your question, it started for me quite selfishly when my wife was on the auction committee at my kid's school, and I kind of had to watch them in their process of preparing for it with lots of paper and notes and things, and wasn't very automated at all. And just what I am passionate about in general as a person is fixing processes. So I just didn't want to keep getting up and checking the paper throughout the evening. So it was just saying simple solutions like, I have a phone in my pocket. Can we just text a bid in? And to Scott's point, I don't have to stop all throughout the evening to remember to check that paper and come back, right? It's just a smoother transition. I can text a bid in. I'll get an outbid notification when that happens. So it all started with solving problems that I saw at events to make it easier for me. And then we just continue to see more problems. I remember an event I had to wait an hour to check out and pay. I didn't want to do that again. So we tried to solve that by saying, let's make it easier. Let's let you pay from your phone, from your seat, from your bed the next morning if you forgot to go by the checkout table. All these things are possible with technology. And that's kind of what we like to do is try to help events solve problems, to have smooth events and lower barriers through technology.
So we're still on the front end of the event. We're talking about, how do we get them in the room, get them in the right space, lower the friction. Sam, one of the things that you mentioned is that having them interact with the platform well ahead of the event is a way of reducing friction. Can you talk about that?
100%. From our standpoint, I would say that is the one point. If I could only coach an event on one thing, that would be it, which is to say, the largest friction point at most events is they tend to want to have a hotel check-in at the door. So 300 people crash the door and they want a credit card from every single one of them, their home address, their cousin's name, and the best mayor out in the world wouldn't try to do this, right? So the simple fix for that is to say, if you sell them a ticket on our platform 6 weeks prior, we're going to ask them their name. We're going to ask them their email so we can send them the receipt. And of course, they need to put their card in the system to pay for that ticket. And now all of a sudden, magically, when they arrive at the door, all those things are on file. We just simply click check in. They receive a text that says welcome, click here to view items, and they're through that door in 20 seconds, feeling really good. And more importantly, they're touching a platform that's familiar to them because it's where they bought their ticket already. So we're lowering that learning curve, lowering barriers, and creating that guest experience that's going to make them feel good about being there, feel good about giving.
And perfect data capture. Wow, that is a beautiful thing. Otis, we were talking about, that you doing that pre-work and exposing the audience to the platform and also to the auction items ahead of time has another effect. Do you want to talk about that, Otis? The endowment
Sure.
effect?
Yeah, the endowment effect is very powerful. The endowment effect refers to this tendency for people when they actually own things to ascribe greater value to them than they're actually worth. And what we've found, psychologists love to study, social psychologists like myself love to study these things at auctions. It's kind of the perfect venue. What they find is that actually just seeing the items and having a chance to look at items online, for example, creates what psychologists call a pseudo endowment effect. So people imagine themselves owning the items. And then as they're bidding, that happens again and again and again, because when you're bidding, as Scott knows, when you're first, you've got the item and then somebody takes it away from you. So this endowment effect is a very powerful motivator for people to bid higher than they would ordinarily. It's really interesting. Psychologists got very interested in studying eBay behavior, and on eBay, many of the items at auction go for the higher than the buy it now price. So people could just buy the item for $100, but when there's an auction, involved, they wind up spending $150 for the same item. So we know that, that tells us there's a lot of irrational behavior in auctions.
So Otis, I'm curious, we had talked about in our other work that donors don't really see it as, really bought in donors don't see it as donating. They see it as moving money from one space in their life to another. So I know psychology is a big soup of different biases that crowd each other out. How does the endowment effect and the other effect of I'm just moving money work together? Like, is there any negative or positive interaction on that?
Yeah, but what you're referring to is, when you have, let's say that I am a American Cancer Society supporter, and part of my identity is a warrior against cancer, say. I'm not thinking of that the money is leaving me and going somewhere else. I'm just moving my money around within my identity, if you will, to make something that I want happen that day, which is, more research to be done with regards to cancer. So, it's people who are these super supporters and really have it ingrained in their identity. It's very easy for them to spend a lot of money at these kinds of events.
You think the endowment effect heightens their desire to move money to a different account?
Listen, as soon as an item is involved, it's kind of like what was that movie where Robert De Niro said once the sequence of combat is engaged, it's in it to the end. Once the items are up for bid, that item, if a person desires that item, that desire for the item takes over, and it just follows to the logical conclusion.
Love it. Love it. All right, Scott, back to you. You have been an auctioneer for a very long time and you lived through the COVID pivot. My understanding is that you were freaking out about what to do and Sam was freaking out about what to do. And then you guys finally got together. And the phrase that you used talking about that was, we were searching for zero latency. Tell me what that is and tell me why that's important.
Absolutely. Well, before 2020, heck, we'd never heard of a virtual auction. And then all of a sudden, we have a limited amount of time that we had to create virtual auctions. Nobody had ever done it. So we were, totally pioneering the whole thing. And it didn't take very long. And I'm kind of proud of this, but I did the third one in the country. The first two were on a Saturday night, and then I did mine on a Tuesday night. So we really didn't have time to learn anything. We were all kind of operating independently. But what we learned really quick, because you pretty much have to use software, right? Electronic bidding software. But the problem is, there was too much of a time delay. We were going to say, and we'll be back with you in 3 or 4 minutes and we'll tell you who won the item, because we didn't know. There was too much time that people had to get their bids in. Well, I went searching for zero latency. A zero latency means from the time someone pushes the button on their phone in virtual to the time I see it in the studio, it's less than half a second. So in other words, we're able to hold an actual auction. As an auctioneer, I'm actually able to do a chant, right? 500, now 1,000, 1,000, now 1,500.
Yay,
and people were clicking in real time. Because what it was, we were sort of doing before Event.Gives and zero latency, we were doing a telethon. We were hoping that people would bid. With zero latency, we had an auction in real time that felt like an auction.
So Sam, how many hours straight did you stay awake trying to get to zero latency and deliver it on your platform?
Well, I was proud of how quickly we moved too. I learned about Scott, you doing the third one the other day. I was super impressed by that. We tried a couple things like a lot of people. We tried to tack on some services to YouTube Live and Facebook Live. And, the best they could do is 30 seconds between when I talked and you saw the video of me saying that, right? And now I've got to wait for you to also bid and come back, to Scott's point. So we just knew it was extremely important that if you wanted to have a virtual event that made it feel like we were in room and we could engage like we were in room, there had to be absolutely no delay. And, we're under a second, 500 milliseconds, half a second, which is zero latency. That's what the holy grail was. we had to build our own platform from end to end to achieve that. And our first event was on a Wednesday night. I don't know how many people showed up, a couple hundred, and they raised $80,000 in 24 minutes. And we knew we had something because it was easy for them to do. I couldn't believe people would show up virtually on a Wednesday night because no one had done that before, right? But they showed up and they bid and they engaged. And, you know, the light bulb went off and we knew we had something. And of course, immediately said, let's reach out to others in our community and say, we can hold events again. You know, we can all get back to the work of fundraising again. So it's really exciting.
So I'm hearing a couple of things. I'm hearing that, and we're seeing this in our social fundraising world where it used to be you gathered your team, you went to the local high school, you raised money beforehand, but you did the event together. Now what we're seeing is that teams are composed of people from all over. And some of them show up on site that day to participate. Are we seeing the same thing in auctions? Like, for example, if Aunt Bessie is, you know, deeply committed to this mission, but she is not in good health enough to come to the auction, can she participate?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We see it a lot. You know, a lot of people call that hybrid. We kind of have moved into the paradigm of we're pretty much back to normal. Events are in room. That's what people prefer. They like to see people have FaceTime, and, you know, all those things. I believe it's certainly the best way to keep reinforcing your mission with them is to have them show up. But now we can say, let's include a digital component so that people can also attend and engage virtually. So it's really just kind of become an add-on to what is, you know, an in-room event.
And one of the things I recall you saying is that the in-room event provides recency. What is that and why is it important?
You know, we saw in looking at people returning from COVID, the numbers just weren't quite what they were pre-COVID. There's probably a lot of reasons for that, but we kind of looked into it and found a factor was that the longer the time span between when I had physically interacted with this organization, the lower my recency of cause was, right? I had started to lose my passion because it had been some time since I engaged in it. So, you know, getting you back in room, I believe is extremely important, but including a way to participate digitally is now allowing us to just have larger audiences.
So Otis, I would love for you to comment on two things. Number one, that recency effect, you know, what is that exactly? And number two, even though we all agree that being in room is better, is there a value in adding, how much value would there be in adding the virtual component in terms of connecting the person to the mission as a constituent?
Yeah, it's essential. You know, what we're talking about is what psychologists call social validation. You know, people are drawn to other people who have their same beliefs and values. And as they interact with those people more, it strengthens that part of their identity and makes it more likely that they're going to reach out to that group again. So it's kind of this cycle. It's called the social validation feedback loop. So yeah, that's very important. Now, but interestingly, I'll throw a curveball in here in terms of just the auction itself. Psychologists have been surprised that the virtual auction behaves very, very much like a live auction. So let's kind of separate the identity and the mission and so forth and the affinity of the mission just to the auction itself. The auction itself is going to proceed pretty much as if it was in person and have the same kind of outcomes. It's interesting that people who are bidding, that they know that they're bidding against a computer, spend less money than when they know that they're bidding against other real people. So in terms of the auction itself, it's going to happen pretty much the same. But as Sam said, it's really important for other reasons for people to gather in groups and interact and so forth.
Very good. Okay, Otis, I'm going to stick with you for a moment and change the subject a bit. So what position does Scott have when he's the auctioneer? Is he the authority figure? Or if I'm bidding, am I kind of trying to please Scott?
Oh, absolutely. You know, Scott is setting the norms for how people are going to behave. And Scott's kind of the ringmaster. People are constantly unconsciously looking for others for social cues, and so Scott's giving them these cues over and over and over again.
And Scott, you want to jump into that? And what are you thinking about? What are you trying to accomplish as you're managing the crowd?
Well, I'm trying to manage the crowd expectation for one. I'm trying to create excitement. I'm trying to get the most money possible for the charity that I'm working with that evening. I'm trying to make everyone who bids feel good about their bid, right? They didn't just pop it up there and I just go, if I'm doing a commercial auction, and I used to do commercial auctions, right? It's just how to get to the high number as fast as you can, say sold and move to the next item. It's not like that at a fundraising auction. Right? When you bid, I want to let you win that item. Might be for 2 seconds. I might have 5 more paddles up, but I'm going to look you dead in the eye and take your bid, let you feel good about it before I move on to the next person. Now that all happens pretty quick, but with all the cues that you give people, right? The eye contact, the pointing, that all makes a difference. But I want you to win because I want you to feel good. Because when I turn over here and take another bid, when I come back to you, I want you to still be feeling good and not looking for a bargain, right? If you want, I always tell people as we're going along, look, bidding is fun. Just look at the people, right? And it kind of reminds them that, hey, yeah, it is fun. And they do want to bid and they want to support the cause. And we want them to bid irrationally, with irrational generosity.
I love it. I love that phrase too. So Otis would call that auction fever, I think, right, Otis? How would you define psychologically irrational bidding and auction fever?
Oh, that's exactly what auction fever is. You've got you've got the time pressure, which is incredibly important. You've got Scott keeping the pace up and so forth. You've got you've got social facilitation. You're influenced by other people, and we take our cues from other people, not just Scott, but the other people who are bidding. If the other people are bidding, that tells us, hey, it's okay for me to bid too. And then you've got the endowment effect, as I mentioned. As Scott said, every time people put in the high bid, they've won it until they lose it, and that's a very tough feeling. And Scott makes that all happen. That's what auction fever is all about.
So I'm curious, Sam, how does, in my mind, I see Sam running around knocking down barriers so people can behave as irrationally as they want to with no friction. I see Scott, encouraging them and recognizing them and making them feel good about doing it. If I'm participating in a live auction that's in the room and I'm virtual, how do we help people feel that way? How do we help them have auction fever and get that good feeling that Scott making eye contact gives in the room?
Yeah, I'll speak to that. Some of the things we do are very pointed. We did a lot of research around the psychology, not of just giving, but also of, how do you create those kind of dopamine hits that make you want to do something again? And so a couple of things, it was very important to us in zero latency and the way that we built our stream and the engagement was to allow Scott to look you in the eye through the camera, right? To create that same in-room experience. But really importantly, to give him that feedback immediately so that he can, when I hit that button, he said my name and that felt really good. And we even go as far to give you what we call, well, we didn't make it up. It's called haptic feedback, and that means when I press the button, we actually make your device vibrate a little bit as a kind of tangible feedback that you hit it. And it actually comes down to a precise cadence of vibrations that increase that dopamine hit and make me just want to do it again. So that's a look into a lot of things we look at and how to create fever through that virtual experience.
I love it. Okay, Scott, back to you. What disrupts auction fever? What trips us up?
Oh, disrupts. That's the key word there. Disrupts. It can be anything. It can be everything. It can be a balloon popping, right? That sounds really small. Oh my goodness, you just stopped the entire room. right then, everybody's going to look that way. People getting up. Sam mentioned getting up. The worst thing in the world to do is to close your silent auction or let bidding go on during the live auction. If I get up, look, it's not about me. It's about everybody else that turns and looks at me that I got up. All right. And that makes people subconsciously think, well, maybe I should be getting up right now. And it creates lots of headache. If it's during the live auction and you've scheduled it too late and people are like, well, I'm ready to go. And you get up and you leave. It's not they weren't going to spend any money anyway, Scott. It doesn't matter. Yes, it does matter. The next thing you know, we've got 2/3 of a room instead of having a full house because people got up and left. Anything can be a disruption. Somebody can come up and ask me a question. If I can't make that part of the show, it's a disruption. That's why I always tell people, look, you want to tell me something, write a note. It's also a disruption to me. Write a note and hand it to me. I can read a note without being distracted. But boy, if you tell me I have to stop, I have to listen, and then I have to get started again. Well, when I stop, everybody else stopped too, because it sounds egotistical, but I'm the show. Everybody's taking their leadership. Everybody's taking their direction from me. If somebody interrupts me, I've just interrupted everyone. And man, that's what you don't want to do. So once again, no disruptions, smoother the transition. If the building's not on fire, and I've had fire alarms go off before, if the building's not on fire, don't allow anything to disrupt the auction.
I love it. Sam, what have you seen in that regard?
Yeah, we talked about these the other day, and Scott, you said a couple things that really stuck with me. One of the metaphors I used in this is, you're at a fundraising event, but it's a show. You're watching the show, and to Scott's point, the show must go on, right? And I kind of equated it to if I'm at an actual play on a stage, and there's either an intentional moment where one of the actors breaks that fourth wall and talks to the audience. It kind of stops the show for a moment. Certainly if someone gets up in front of me and walks down the aisle, it breaks it just long enough for me to get out of this mode of watching the show and look around me and do things like, wow, what time is it now? And is it time to go? And now I'm thinking about these things instead of being engrossed in the show. If the show just goes on, I never stop to think, what time is it? Should we go? I don't know. And that really struck me, the way you kind of think about the event as just a show that needs to keep its cadence.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a quick horror story, right? There shouldn't be dinner service going on at this time, but the timeline was a little bit off. We were selling a necklace. I remember the piece. I remember the amounts. This lady had bid $20,000, and someone else, and I bid them at $22,500. And when I went back to the lady for $25,000, someone had put this huge piece of prime rib or whatever in front of her, and the waiter who set it down in front of her blocked her view from me.
Oh no.
Total disruption. She totally cooled off. She's looking at this huge chunk of meat. She looked like a vegetarian. But anyway, it total disrupted her. And I sold it for $22,500 because this lady was done. And she was with me from the beginning. I know she would have bid $25,000 had it not been for this disruption. And it was line of sight, and it was an outside influence, and boom, she was done.
So Otis, what's happening to people? I feel like it almost sounds like I turn on double authentication on Amazon all the time, purely to give me friction, which my husband makes fun of. But what's happening to people when are they coming to their senses in some fashion when they get
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly it. That breaks the fever a little bit, auction fever. And these disruptions, we talk about making it frictionless. I can't emphasize that Scott and Sam have both said how important that is, that people be allowed to engage very rapidly. Again, there's time pressure involved. There's the social facilitation. They're being influenced by others. And anything that breaks that, as Scott has described, really kind of has an impact on their motivation. It's demotivating.
All right, there's been a whole lot of agreement on this talk so far. So let's get into some disagreement. Let's move to the silent auction versus the live auction. So Scott, what are your feelings about the silent auction?
I say ditch the silent auction. It's way too much work and it doesn't bring in enough money. And this is Sam Staley who's going to tell you why it's important.
Go, Sam.
I do think it has a place. We said this the other day. In that room of 1,000 people, there's a small constituency of people with either the passion and or the financial wherewithal to participate in the live auction, right? These are sometimes $10,000, $20,000 items. Well, most people in that room can't afford to play in that game. So I love the silent auction that gives them a way to still engage in fundraising. I get an outbid notification and I place another bid on my $500 item while I'm watching this live auction show that's amazing, right? So I think it definitely has a place, and it lets kind of the rest of the room still participate during that fun show, which is the live auction.
Yes, and I'm just giving Sam a hard time, Sam a hard time about this. But one thing it does, right? So we don't want anything to disrupt the fund and need, which we haven't talked about. I call it special appeal. We haven't talked about that, but I'm sure we will. But if I'm sitting at a table and I know, and I'm checked out mentally because they're going for $10,000, I don't have $10,000 in my bank account. Why? I can't buy a $10,000 item. I can stay engaged, because one thing is for sure, look at every restaurant, there is a cell phone or 5 sitting on tables, right? We're accustomed to that. So it does help to keep the engagement up, because again, people want to win. And as long as they're the high bidder, Otis, they're winning, right?
They are. Let me come down in the middle of this one, okay? This is the silent auction thing. I mentioned that that psychologists have shown that virtual auctions mimic the dynamic of live auctions. Silent auctions really don't so much. Yeah, it's more like a sale. So yes, there are incremental bids and so forth, but you don't have any of that social facilitation that you really have when you're interacting with people. The time pressure forces you to engage with them and so forth. So it really is a different dynamic.
So I'm curious, the opportunity to participate in a silent auction while the live auction was going on and not leave your seat is really a new one, isn't it? So what's happened? What have you seen?
Right. And that's very important. It used to be, I was adamant that a silent auction should close before people went into the ballroom, because I don't want people getting up during the course of the auction. It also allowed people for the people who are reconciling the auction to take care of that while dinner is going on, so everyone knows how much they owe at the end. Well, with Event.Gives and Sam's invention, it's all electronic. So it's all automatic. And if they've given their card ahead of time, so's the payment. All they've got to do is pick up their item. So one thing is for sure, when you're doing a silent auction, use electronic bidding. I did an event the other night where they're still using pen and paper, and I forgot how archaic it felt, because it's not efficient. It's not efficient on so many levels, and it's so much easier, and you'll get so much more money if you're using electronic bidding. It'll pay for itself.
Sam, have you seen any data around silent auctions? And I guess I'm thinking about, have you run any events where they didn't have one, like it was all live auction stuff? And is there an impact, or is it 1 + 1 = 3, or no?
I don't know the math, but I do know we see a ton of events every year, and there's a number that not only just do a live auction and no silent, but we've done several events. The first virtual event that I talked about had a couple silent auctions, but the fund to need, the paddle to raise, donate, whatever you want to call that. We see some events that's all they do. So I think there's a good mix. And what I'm still surprised at, that I learned through doing, and Scott, this, is that fund to need outpaces everything, even the live auction. As fun and exciting as it is, people's generosity, when you say raise your paddle to donate $10,000, just outpaces everything. And I'm always amazed and think that's great dynamic at events.
So Scott, can you talk about why you call it Fund a Need and what the other names are, just so that the audience is
Yeah,
on one page?
absolutely. And it's called a variety of things. I mean, there's probably 100 different names. It started out as Fund a Need. And when I heard about it in 1999, it was because people were raising their paddles to fund a need. The church needed a new roof. The school needed a playground, and that's what they were raising money for. Well, now, as Sam mentioned, it's bigger than the live auction, generally speaking, and we don't want to just earmark that money for one thing. That's why I started calling it a special appeal. It's also called a paddle raise.
Mhm.
If you're curing a disease, it's fund a cure. Whatever we want to call it. But it's amazing. People don't always want more stuff. Some people don't even want an experience or a trip. They've already done that, right? But they want to support the cause. And this is the best and easiest way to support the cause is with the paddle raise or special appeal.
So Sam, run through the typical run of show and the order in which things happen. And then you and Scott were making a case to change that order. So go through the typical and then through the potential differently ordered event.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways you could put a show together, but I think by and large, that run of show starts with, check in at the door. So we know you're here. Usually immediately they're kind of running that receiving line past a bar to get a drink in your hand as fast as possible. So you start to feel comfortable. Um, they're usually going to put you through the silent auction tables. So on the way to the ballroom, you see the guitars and the things on the tables to go see that you can participate in the silent auction. And then you're in the ballroom, typically seated at tables with a dinner service. And then at some point in the evening, probably after dinner, is the live auction. And there's always what I kind of lovingly call the sad puppy video. That's the mission moment. That's where we kind of show a video or have someone on stage to tell us why we're here. And then the Fund a Need usually rounds it out. And I know that's typical. And I've recently heard lots of reasons why that shouldn't be the last thing, that the Fund a Need maybe should go before the live auction. And I know, Scott, you do that a lot and have great success at it.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, back in the day, I used to position the Fund a Need, if you will, in the middle of the auction because it was going to be hopefully the biggest item in the whole live auction. Well, that ship sailed, right? We're now raising more money. So I wanted to put it in the prime spot in the auction. Well, I don't do that anymore. And then there's conventional wisdom. If you don't buy something at the live auction, then you can give it during the special appeal and you should have that positioned at the end. Well, guess what? I was wrong on that one too. Move it to the front. Not everybody can buy a live auction item, but everyone can participate in the special appeal, in that paddle race. And it allows, I call it getting your uniform dirty early, right? I wasn't a very good Little League baseball player. And so the coach and everybody would go out on the field except for me. I'd be sitting on the bench, riding the pines, right? And then about the time the game was almost over, the coach would look down the bench. Of course, by this time, my mind is gone, right? I'm thinking about everything in the world but baseball. The coach says, Robertson, get in there and hit. Well, my mind wasn't in the game anymore. I'd get up there and I'd strike out. See, I told you it wasn't any good. But if the coach had put me in at the first inning, I would have been involved in that game the whole way through. Right? So let's get their uniform dirty early. Let everybody feel like they're part of the event, because what you always have to avoid is the have and the have-nots. You cannot have and have-nots. There's a lot of ways that you can create that situation. You want to minimize that as much as possible. If you have your special appeal early, everybody can participate. The other thing is energy, and we didn't talk about this yet, but the bell curve of alcohol. People have this mistaken thought that the more people drink, the more they'll spend. It's not the truth, right? The more they drink, the more they won't pay attention. So if there's a bell curve of alcohol, we want to catch people on the way up and at least at the plateau, but not on the way down. And that's another reason to have the special appeal before the live auction.
Scott, just in case someone's watching this who's never done a paddle raise, special appeal, Fund a Need, tell us exactly how it works. Like, there's not one winner, there are many winners. Explain how
Well,
that
there
works.
are many winners, and especially the charity. And as Sam said, show the sad puppy video, right? We want a 2 to 3 minute video or a compelling person to speak for simply 2 to 3 minutes, really narrowing it down why they want to give. We want this to be an emotional plea, right? We want that to be the pitch on why people should give. Videos are great at this. Then we come out of the video, and I start at a high number and work our way low. And when I say high number, it usually means we have someone in the crowd, in the audience, who is committed to what I call a leadership momentum gift. Meaning, listen, I support the cause. I want other people to support the cause. I'll start you at $10,000. So I say, and who tonight will donate $10,000? And the paddle goes up, right? Hopefully another one or 2 or 3 more go up. And then we go down to 5,000, 2,500, 1,000. Usually you divide it in half, 500, 250, and 100. Although some people stop earlier than that. It depends on the, on the size of the event. But we start high, we go low, and we appreciate each and every donation.
Love it. Hey, Otis. So the crowd that's bidding in this moment, they are, I would assume, the true philanthropist, right?
Yes, and I think having a leadership gift is a brilliant idea. What it does is it sets a social norm. It says that, it's this person thinks that it's important enough to give this large amount of money, and it kind of gives people it really gives them leave to join that person. We don't have to get into it in a big way. I wish that. For things you see a lot of times, match your gift. A generous donor has pledged a 2 times match gift or whatever to match your gift 5 times. The leadership gift works, the research says, better than this matching kind of a scenario. So a little bit of an aside there, but it's something that bugs me.
So I want to jump off something Scott said too. You said you start high and go low. And Otis, you had some research that validates what Scott his path?
Actually, with the leadership gift, he's starting high and going low. Now, Scott and I had a disagreement. As a psychologist, I know about the anchoring effect. Okay, the anchoring effect is this: people are very influenced by the first number that they see. So let's say you go onto a car lot, and the salesman says, let me show you our $80,000 car first. And you go and look at the $80,000 car, and I can't afford that. He says, well, let me show you the $45,000 car. Now, because you've just seen an $80,000 car, the $45,000 car doesn't seem so expensive. Whereas if you would have started low, the $45,000 car might have seemed like a stretch. Now, so I thought, oh, the same principle must hold for auctions. But I was wrong. Scott, tell me why I was wrong. And I found research that says that Scott was right, not me.
Well, and we're talking about auctions, not funding needs. So,
yes,
special
right.
appeal. Let's not get that. Let's not get that confused. But with auctions, people say, it's lots of times auction committees will say, well, we need to call you and tell you what we want for the starting bids. And this committee who does this once a year wants to come up with some number. And it's usually a number that's way too high. It's what they think should be the starting bid. Let's say an item is worth $10,000. Let's just throw it out there. Fair market value is $10,000, and they'll want me to start it at $8,000. No way. That's the wrong idea. What you want to do is you want to start at a lower number. I call it the no-brainer number. All right. And build it on up. Let's say the trip for $10,000 is to the Bahamas. Well, you're sitting in the audience. You weren't planning on going to the Bahamas. You don't want to go to the Bahamas, and you sure as heck aren't going to spend $10,000 for it. It's for $2,500. And I raised my paddle. I didn't know I wanted to go to the Bahamas, but at $2,500, that's a no-brainer price for me. So I popped my number up there, right? And then we go up, and I keep bidding. I didn't know I was wanting the trip, and suddenly I want the trip, right? The dopamine's going off, the people, the ownership, it's all happening. And so whether I think of an opening bid, right, I want to know 2 things. One, where's the no-brainer price? And the next one is, what's my next increment going to be, right? If we start at $2,000, my next increment can be $2,100. It can be 2,500. It can be 3,000. It really can't be anything beyond that. But if my opening bid is 2,500, now I can go to 3,500. I can go to 3,000. I can go to 5,000. $2,500 is bidder now 5,000. 5,000 is bidder 7,500. That's 75. 75 is bidder now 10,000. And I'm already at 10,000. And it only took me 4 bids to get there.
Wow.
So I believe,
Yes,
I don't believe in starting out at a high number. I believe in that and starting out on a low number and roaring with it.
but researchers, Scott, at Northwestern prove what a good psychologist you are. They showed that it was really the number of bids that was most important, and having a low bid kind of reduced the barrier to entry. And then as more people bid, there's more time investment, and time investment's important because they've been bidding on this over and over and over again. So you're exactly right. Your hunch is right.
So Scott, a good committee would supply you with fair market value and let you make your own judgments from there.
The real exactly right. And I want a realistic retail value. Don't let it be like people market their homes. Well, my home's worth 200,000, but boy, I think it ought to try to get 250. And my friend's house, who doesn't live in this town, got 300. And boy, for 350, I could get the house I want, so I'm going to list it for 400. They just talk themselves into it. When the realistic thing, it's a $200,000 house.
Got it. So, Scott, talk a little bit more about bidding in general. One of the things we talked about earlier was the incremental nature of what you ask for, how you set those increments in your mind.
Absolutely. And you just want to make sure you never paint yourself into a corner, right? You want to have a bid number that's going to allow you to escalate the bid. Like if you start at 2,500, 2,600. If I ask for 2,600 after I got the opening bid at 2,500, what's my next number? 2,700.
Yeah.
And then 2,800. You're going to pass out no-dos for these poor people. It's a $10,000 trip. You can't go in $100 increments. And the other thing that sometimes auction savvy, or people who think they're auction savvy, they'll do this sign, which in the auction world, that means they want to cut the bid in half. All they're trying to do is be a disruption. And I usually don't accept that, especially at lower numbers, right? Because there's other people that are bidding. And if I cut it in half, all of a sudden they've disrupted me and it takes it way down and the item doesn't sell for as much as possible. They won, right? Because they disrupted me. But I don't allow that to happen because it's going to hurt the charity. Now, do I ever cut bids? That's what it's called, is cutting a bid. Of course I do. But I only do that if I don't think I'm going to get another bid.
Interesting. What happens, Sam? I think you and I talked about this. What happens when nobody bids? What do you do? How do you deal with that?
I think for, the person standing on stage, that's worst case scenario, right?
Yeah.
And I did want to just call out really quickly, Scott, when you told your baseball story, it took me way back. I could smell the cut grass. I was also that guy that was not very good. And more games than not, I was rubbing dirt on my uniform just so I looked like I played when I went to Dairy Queen afterwards with everybody else. So definitely can identify that. So yeah, to get 0 bids, I think, is probably the worst case scenario, right? Because now several things you've disrupted. People go, uh-oh, what's happening? This is different. Now the show has stopped and I'm looking around and I realize I'm in the room again. And I think all of a sudden the room has been given the permission that no bids is a thing. That's a possibility. So I just won't bid on this thing I'm not interested in. I'll wait on the next one, right? So I think it's worst case scenario. And, there's lots of ways to mitigate that. But, whatever you can do to ensure that you at least get that initial icebreaker to give Scott that springboard to do what he's phenomenal at and start pushing it higher.
Last thing I want to ask about, Sam, you must be part of the data obsessed because you mentioned something called dollars in the room. And I thought that was really fascinating. Tell us what you mean by that and what you might be able to do with that.
Yeah, you've hit on my passion. That is the number, that is the phrase that I have had in my head since I started this. And what I mean by that is I can look at thousands of events we've looked at, and we can actually pull data and track bids during an event and paddle raises during an event. And I can actually look at an event that at the end of the night raised $480,000, and the organizers look at that same number and go, that was a phenomenal night. Last year we raised 420, we raised 50,000 more, successful event. And it was. However, I can look at that same event and say at 9:15 in the evening, you had $560,000 in the room, meaning someone had bid on a $10,000 item and got outbid and lost it. That money went back in their pocket, right? And so by dollars in the room, I mean, how much was the most dollars we had the room at any point in the evening? And then what we strive to do is to uncover that, and then give you tools, whether it's through technology or process, or just so that you have the data to outreach to people later to say, you were going to give 10,000. In fact, you had already spent it. You lost an opportunity. Here are 3 more opportunities, whether it's through the paddle raise, calling that person out, or sometimes you have an item that you can turn on a second one of and give them another opportunity to put that money back in the room. So that's a really big number for me that I get excited about, and excited about continuing to find ways to exploit that and help fundraise and capture the most that we can from that room.
So what I take away
Absolutely. You never want to leave money on the table. And if you let money walk out the door that was there, you messed up. It might look good on paper, but I know when money walks out the door, and we sure try to avoid that situation at all costs. And with Sam, with Event.Gives and what Sam's been able to create, he's able to track that information and give that information to you.
that
And
is fascinating.
one thing I'll add too is I think the best organizations understand that this night of fundraising, that is my event, sometimes they just go, that's it. That's our opportunity. The best organization understand, for a lot of people in the room, that's the starting point at a relationship with that person, right? So we talk about attendees at the kind of lowest form of describing someone in the room. We hope to turn them into donors, right? By enticing them to donate and give. Otis, you said it earlier, even better than a donor, let's turn them into a philanthropist who is really passionate about giving. I like to extend that one step further. And we work with a lot of auctioneers and events, and I think Scott, in his understanding of this, is one of the best. Instead of philanthropists, let's turn them into champions for our organization, so that they're not only giving and passionate, they're championing and encouraging others to give and increasing that network. So I like to recognize that. I know Scott does in the way he thinks about events. The name's entirely appropriate, Champion Fundraising. You're creating champions, Scott, at these events. And we like to try to create tools to not only engage during the event, but give you data and actionable tools to continue a relationship with these donors and philanthropists and champions after the event.
Yeah, and if I could just chime in, I mean, you want to be the charity, the organization. They want to be the same before, during, and after. Don't look at your donors, your philanthropists, your champions as a dollar sign, right? Be grateful for what they have done for you. Also, position every event as a donor cultivation event. People come to they may come to your event for the first time. They're dipping their toe in the water. They give a little bit of money. They buy a little something, but mostly what they're doing is they're looking around, learning about your organization, and dare I say, waiting to see how they're going to be treated by the organization. So treat everybody like they are the superstar that they are. Follow up with them. Make sure that maybe they show up at an event and they don't know anyone. Well, there should have been a committee looking at the list saying, hey, who is on here that we don't know? and make sure that you pair somebody up with them to introduce them around and make them feel welcome, right? We've all been to parties where we didn't know anybody. And boy, having a wingman to help you out with that makes a big difference. And it makes us feel better and different about the charity. So every event should be a donor cultivation event, and then cultivate that donor, but don't look at them as a dollar sign. Look at them as someone that you like, they like you. Let's bond together.
You make fundraising sound fun. That's weird.
It is. Come to my event.
You know what? I might have to whip out the high heels. You guys have got me talked into it. I don't know. We're not going to pantyhose. That's too far, but high heels, yes. All right. So we have peeled this onion brilliantly, I think. I am impressed with the evolution of galas and the integration of data and bringing down the friction of attending. I think that is brilliant. So we hope that you will use the information that you got today to help more people make more irrational bids for good and to feel great about it. We know that you will. Sam, Scott, Otis, thank you very much.
Thank
Have a
you,
good
Thank
Katrina.
you. Thanks for the
And
opportunity.
Otis and Scott, great to see you guys.